In the winter of 1943, the Atlantic was no mere ocean. It was a battlefield etched in salt and shadow, where the pulse of war thrummed 400 feet below the waves. For 4 relentless years, the Kriegsmarine's U-boats had reigned supreme, ghosts in the machine of the sea, prowling convoy lanes with the precision of surgeons and the hunger of wolves. They called it Der Atlantikkrieg, the Battle of the Atlantic, but to the men who crewed these steel coffins, it was something more primal, a symphony of silence, conducted by men who had learned to dance with death. The Allies shipped their empire across this watery grave, grain from America, tanks from the Clyde, oil from the Gulf, 40,000 vessels in all, strung out in ragged convoys like beads on a fraying rosary. But the U-boats. The U-boats were the Reaper's scythe. In 1942 alone, they had claimed 7 million tons of shipping, more steel and sinew than the Reich could forge in a year. Ton for ton, Admiral Karl Donitz promised his Führer, ton for ton, they would starve Britain into submission. And for a time, it seemed the promise held. The Wolfpacks, Rudeltaktik, they named it, 20, 30, sometimes 40 boats strong, slipped through the murk like smoke, coordinating strikes via Enigma's unbreakable code. A convoy sighted at dusk, torpedoes loosed at midnight, dawn breaking over oil-slicked wreckage, the cries of the drowning fading into the gulls' indifferent screech. Kapitänleutnant Detlev Krankenhagen, 32, a veteran of a dozen patrols whose boat U-160 was a legend in Lorient's bunkers with 12 ships to her credit, survivors whispering of the ghost of the mid-Atlantic, leans over the hydrophone operator's station in the dim red glow of the control room. His face is gaunt, eyes sharp as flensing knives, a Ritterkreuz glinting at his throat like a talisman. The air hangs thick with diesel fumes, sweat, and the metallic tang of fear sublimated into routine. Lieutenant Zoomer, young and eager, his uniform patched from a near miss off Halifax, presses his ear to the cups, fingers tracing invisible arcs on the chart table. Krankenhagen, voice steady, laced with the quiet authority of a man who has heard the ocean's lies and learned to counter them. Contact, report the bearing. Zoomer escort vessel, her Kalu, destroyer class, zigzagging east-northeast. Bearing 045, range 800 meters. She's blind to us, sir. The convoy's fat sheep plodding behind, 20-plus merchants, no air cover yet. Krankenhagen nods, a ghost of a smile cracking his salt-stiffened lips. The control room hums with ritual. A mechanic oils a valve with deliberate strokes. The chief engineer mutters prayers to the diesels. The radio man decodes a flash from BDU, Befehlshaber U-Boote, Donitz's iron fist and breast. Angriff erlaubt. Primärziele, tanker. Attack permitted. Primary targets, the oilers. It's all so familiar, this choreography of the deep. They've mapped the escort's patterns like lovers' breaths. The way a Fletcher-class destroyer arcs wide on her turns, leaving a fleeting blind spot beneath her keel. Depth charges. Predictable thunder, rolling harmlessly astern if you hold your dive just so. Sonar pings, a siren song, but one they know how to mute. The Wolfpack's ballet unfolds in sensory immersion. On U-160's bridge at periscope depth, spray lashes the crew's oilskins as Krankenhagen whispers attack vectors. Torpedo tubes flood with a hydraulic hiss, the schwupp of air compressions. Launch, a muffled thump, then silence as the fish streak away. Explosions bloom distant, orange fireballs against the night sea, debris pattering like rain on steel. Cheers erupt below decks, rationed schnapps passed hand to hand, a harmonica wheezing Lily Marlene in the galley. Far below on the ocean floor, the skeletal husks of earlier kills lie. Liberty ships split like cracked eggs, their cargoes spilling into the abyss, jeeps tangled in netting, crates of spam blooming fungal in the current. The U-boats glide past, unscarred, untouchable. These were not mere sailors, but alchemists of the abyss, men who measured courage in atmospheres of pressure, who turned the ocean's crush into a cradle. Krankenhagen's crew, like thousands across the Pax, had forged their faith in the forge of survival. "Wir sind die Herren der See," they told themselves. "We are the lords of the sea." Experience was their armor, the art of the silent running, engines throttled to a whisper, every man frozen in place as charges bracketed the hull. They'd outfoxed the hedgehogs of convoy screens, slipped the noose of hunter-killer groups. Donitz's doctrine was gospel. Die Boote müssen schwimmen, the boats must swim, evade and strike from the shadows. And it worked. In the first quarter of 43, the packs had mauled SC-121 off Newfoundland, 14 ships gone in 2 nights. The escorts chasing ghosts while U-160 claimed the crown jewel, a laden Queen Mary surrogate bound for Murmansk. But beneath the triumph, the Atlantic murmured dissent. March had brought black pit storms, where wolfpacks like Sturmer and Dranger prowled the gap between Brazil and Freetown, only to find the sea emptier. Convoys rerouted, faster with teeth, liberties from the States, V&Ws from the Clyde, their screws turning patterns the Germans had once gamed like chess. Air cover stretched further, Catalinas from Iceland shadowing the lanes with radar eyes. And then the losses. U-68 holed off the Azores, her crew bobbing like corks before the sharks claimed them. Whispers in the wardrooms of Lorient over ersatz coffee and tinned sausages. Diatomies have something new. Centimetric radar, they say, sees through the night like the devil's own lantern. In Lorient's U-boat pens that March, concrete bunkers loom like cathedrals of war, scarred by RAF tallboy bombs that shake the earth but never quite pierce the Reich's vault. Krankenhagen strides the wet docks, greatcoat flapping, greeting comrades from U-515 and U-68's sister boats. A cluster of officers huddles under a flickering bulb, faces hollowed by patrol shadows, cigarettes glowing like fireflies. A captured Norwegian merchantman, SS Nornes, has yielded scraps. A dog-eared Admiralty report, smudged with salt, detailing forward-firing anti-submarine mortars. The name, Hedgehog. Corvette and Captain Frederick, snorting, a laugh like breaking ice, stocky, scarred from a ramming off Liverpool. A Hedgehog? What next? The British arming porcupines. It's a spigot mortar, boys, fires 24 pea-sized bombs ahead of the ship. No bigger than grenades, they say, like spitting at a storm. Krankenhagen, leaning against a bollard, lighting a Turkish from a dented case, his eyes distant, calculating. Rumors from the prize crews. Tested on wrecks in the Clyde, but the charges barely dented the hulls. And forward throwing? Absurd. Depth charges roll astern for a reason. The blast propagates down. This thing leaves a dead zone right under the bow. We'd be ghosts in their graveyard. Laughter ripples through the group. Harsh, defiant, the kind that wards off the damp chill seeping from the pens. A young lieutenant, fresh from Kiel's academy, pipes up with boyish scorn, his voice cutting through the haze. Lieutenant, eager, untested, gesturing wildly with his cigarette. Herr Kowloon, imagine the Tommies loading that rubbish in a gale. Clunk clunk, bombs scattering like confetti. We'll dive shallow, ping their props with our snort, and be sipping U-boat champagne while they curse their Hedgehog. More guffaws, backs slapped, tails swapped of evading the old K-guns, those American noisemakers that rattled like tin cans. The Hedgehog? A toy, a jest from desperate yards at Chatham. Physics was on their side. The sea's layers, thermoclines that bent sound, hid hulls and false bottoms. They'd mastered it all. Donitz himself had wired from Berlin, Vertrauen in die Taktik, trust in the tactics. The packs would regroup, milkshakes of boats churning the mid-Atlantic gap until the convoys cracked. Out at sea in April 43, Wolfpack Titmouse stalks HX-235. U-160 shadows a straggler, a Liberty ship limping with engine trouble. Through the periscope, Krankenhagen spots the escort, HMS Vedette, a weathered V-class, her decks cluttered with what looks like a pepper pot array. 24 spigots in a circular cradle, forward-mounted like some mad inventor's folly. His breath fogs the eyepiece. Krankenhagen, muttering to his Fähnrich, voice a thread of silk over steel. There their Hedgehog. Looks like a kitchen colander for giants. Fire a spread, and half will fizzle on the surface. The rest? Harmless plops. The boat dives smooth as a blade into butter. Teefer, silent running. The world compresses. Bulkheads creak under 200 meters, lights dim to conserve juice. Ping ping, the destroyer's Aztec probes, but it's a lazy rhythm, betrayed by the roll of her hull. They wait, breath sink to the hum of the electric motors, the drip of condensation from valves. Minutes stretch to eternities. Then, nothing. No thunder rolling down, no bracketed blooms of white. Just the sea's indifferent murmur. Surfacing at dusk, U-160 claims her prize. 2 fish into the Liberty's guts, flames licking the waves like accusatory tongues. Radio crackles triumph to Zweitreffer, Hedgehog, nutslos. 2 hits, Hedgehog, useless. Wolfpack euphoria fades into montages of victors in the pens at St. Nazaire, bands playing U-boot lead, medals pinned amid champagne toasts. Donitz's portrait gazes from every wardroom, his mantra etched in brass, Der U-Boot Krieg lebt, the U-boat war lives. But in the quiet hours, as boats settle into refit, a radio man intercepts a fragment. Allied chatter, garbled but gleeful. Hedgehog trials exceed expectations. Dismissed with a shrug. Toys don't win wars. They were the apex predators of an unforgiving deep. Men whose hubris was honed by survival, whose laughter was the last sound before the kill. The Atlantic had taught them its rhythms. The groan of hulls under strain, the false echo of a distant screw, the sweet hush after a torpedo found its mark. Innovation? The Allies threw gadgets at the wall. Huff-duff radio fixes, escort carriers like floating airfields. But the U-boats adapted, evolved, endured. A new mortar? It would join the scrap heap of failed fancies, like the magnetic mines that fizzled in salt water, or the aircraft torpedoes that veered wild in crosswinds. Yet in those early spring gales of 43, as packs like Locke and Rostenburg savaged ONS-5, sinking a dozen before scattering, the whispers persisted. Captured logs from a gutted corvette spoke of silent kills, explosions without the telltale roll. Engineering briefs from Bletchley, unseen, of course, hinted at a weapon that bridged the blind spot, turning the escort's bow into a porcupine's quill. But doubt was the sea's great leveler, and the Germans swam in it deep. Skill over chance, experience over experiment. They plotted courses on grease-smeared charts, calibrated dives to the knot, trusted the Enigma's veil. One evening in Lorient, as U-160's crew scrubbed bilges and mended nets, Krankenhagen stands alone on the pen's edge, staring into the oily harbor. A gull wheels overhead, its cry swallowed by the wind. What new devilry, he wonders, but aloud to no one. Krankenhagen, soft, almost reverent, the sea's salt etching lines deeper into his brow. The ocean gives fair warning, or it doesn't. Let the Tommies play with their hedgehogs. We'll bury them in the deep. The crew gathers for the evening meal, sauerkraut from tins, black bread hard as ship's biscuit. Talk turns to the rumor, as it always does, the British mortar dubbed Igel in mocking translation. Laughter bubbles up again, warm against the chill. Stories of failed tests, bombs that sank like stones without a bang. A boatswain's mate mimes the launch, arms flailing, face contorted in comic futility. Plop, 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 the sound of impotence. They eat, they jest, they bed down in hammocks strung like spiderwebs. The pens hum with the low throb of generators, the distant wail of a klaxon from a boat fitting out. Sleep comes fitful, dreams laced with the whoosh of incoming screws, the crack of ice in Arctic convoys. Outside, the tide laps the caissons, indifferent to the empire's riding its back. In the Grand Ledger of War, 1943 marked the hinge. The month of May would etch black in blood as 41 boats kissed the weeds. But in these prelude weeks, confidence was still currency, traded freely in the bunkers. The Hedgehog was a footnote, a punchline in the eternal joke of Allied desperation. They saw it not as harbinger, but as hubris's harmless echo. A clunky contraption born of boffins and bowlers, firing blind into the blue. They laughed at the Hedgehog. They didn't realize they were laughing at their own eulogy. To live in a U-boat was to court the sea's indifference, to wed yourself to a machine that demanded silence as its dowry. It was a faith forged in the fire of routine, a creed etched into every bulkhead and valve. Survive the dive, claim the kill, surface to breathe. For men like those of U-160, the Atlantic was no adversary, but a canvas. Vast, unforgiving, yet yielding to the artist's hand. Pride swelled in their chests not from medals or manifestos, but from the hard-won intimacy of the deep. The way a hull sang under strain, the calculus of currents that masked a flank, the sacred hush that cloaked a torpedo's flight. They were not soldiers of the storm, but its interpreters, priests of pressure, acolytes of the abyss. Kapitänleutnant Detlev Krankenhagen moves through the narrow companionway like a shadow among shadows, his oilskin dripping from a recent watch on the bridge. At 32, he is both father and phantom to his 44 souls, his voice the lodestar that pulls them from panic's edge. He pauses at the galley, where Matrosengefreiter Klaus Weber, a wiry Berliner with ink-stained fingers from pre-war typesetting, stirs a pot of watery pea soup over a single burner. The aroma fights valiantly against the diesel reek, a fleeting mercy in this iron womb. Weber ladles portions into battered tin mugs, his hands steady despite the boat's gentle roll, lessons learned from a gale off Iceland that nearly stove in the conning tower. Weber, grinning through a beard patchy from vitamin-starved months, passing a mug to a bleary-eyed machinist's mate. Erbsensuppe, Herkalu, pea soup with a whisper of ham fat. Better than the slop in teal, eh? Keeps the ghosts at bay. Krankenhagen takes the mug, the warmth seeping through his gloves like a lover's touch. He sips, the broth scalding his tongue, and nods approval. Around the fold-down table, lashed to the deck with frayed line, the off-watch crew clusters. Lieutenant Zoomer, still flushed from hydrophone duty, Obermaschinist Fritz Lang, broad as the boat is long, his coveralls greased to a sheen, and a knot of torpedo loaders, young faces hardened by the grind, swapping dog-eared postcards from sweethearts in Hamburg. The rituals unfold like clockwork liturgy. Mugs clink in mock toast, tails spun to chase the damp. Erzählmal, one urges, tell us again. And so they do, the catechism of survival. Zoomer, leaning in, eyes alight with the fervor of the converted, gesturing with his spoon like a conductor. Remember Onen's 5 last month? 9 Schiffe, 9 fat merchants, wallowing like geese in fog. The escorts flung their charges wide, but we knew the rhythm. Dive to 180, trim for neutral buoyancy, let the thermocline swallow the ping. Herkalu called it, hold. And then, boom, the patterns walked right over us, bubbles tickling the keel like champagne. We surfaced laughing, claimed the oiler ourselves. Laughter rumbles low, a subterranean quake, careful, contained, lest it carry on the hydrophones. Lang, the old salt from Wilhelmshaven, wipes foam from his mustache and launches into his refrain, voice gravelly as a depth charges roll. Langy, thumping the table lightly, eyes distant, reliving the math of evasion. It's physics, lads, pure and simple. The Tommy's astic bounces off the layers, warm on cold, salt on fresh. We thread the needle, dive shallow when they zig, deep when they zag. Their depth charges, big bangs, blind bulls in a china shop. Explode astern, push us away like a lover's shove. But get under their bow? That's the blind spot, the God's own cradle. No roll reaches there. We've danced at a dozen patrols. Die Buddhas and Unser Störbar. The boats are indestructible. Krankenhagen listens, his silence a benediction. He knows this creed by heart, has preached it from breast to the banks. Pride blooms not in bravado, but in the quiet mastery. The way he'd once conned U-160 through a hunter-killer screen off convoy SC-122, 6 escorts pounding the sea to froth while they ghosted the straggler, losing a spread that lit the night with St. Elmo's fire. Faith in the old tactics, Donitz's Wolfpack gospel, was their shield, woven from threads of experience. Schwerpunkt attacks, mass the boats, overwhelm the screen, vanish into the blue. Enigma's cipher kept the packs in symphony. Snorkels let them recharge unseen. Innovation from the enemy? Met with adaptation, not awe. The lee light on Wellingtons? Counter with night dives. Centimetric radar? Paint the masts black, run silent under the moonless pall. The meal winds down, mugs scraped clean with bread heels gone to concrete in the humidity. Weber douses the burner with a hiss, the galley plunging into crimson twilight. The crew disperses to duties, Zoomer to the plot, charting ghost tracks on grease pencil grids, Lang to the diesels, caressing gauges like fretful children. Krankenhagen lingers, drawing Weber aside near the pressure hull, where the sea murmurs through the plates, a constant susurrus like breath in a conch shell. Krankenhagen, voice low, confiding, the weight of command etching furrows in his brow. That rumor from the pens, the Hedgehog. You've heard the lads, ein Witz, but keep ears open on the hydro. If it's forward firing, might change the dance. Not the steps, the music. Weber, pausing in his wipe-down, cloth twisted in calloused fists, his eyes holding a flicker of the printer's skepticism, turned submariner's resolve. Ja, Herkalu, but it's junk, that thing. Bombs like golf balls, no bigger than my fist. Tests in the Firth? Sank without a splash, they say. We'll hear it coming, wump wump, and be gone before the ripples kiss us. We've earned this sea, sir. Blut und Stahl, blood and steel, it bends to us. Krankenhagen clasps his shoulder, the gesture paternal, binding. Blut und Stahl. The motto tattooed on souls from Scapaflow to Scapaflow's revenge. He turns aft, navigating the boat's spine, past the attack center where the periscope's shadow looms like a guillotine, through the petty officer's mess, bunked 3 high in sardine stacks, into the wardroom, his sanctum sanctorum, a foldable table strewn with admiralty charts, dog-eared Siegfried manuals, a framed photo of his wife Elsa, faded to sepia ghosts. He sinks into the worn leather chair, lighting a cigarette, whose smoke curls like question marks. The old tactics, a reliquary of certainties. Dive profiles etched in memory, 60 meters for evasion, 150 for the kill shot. Torpedo arcs calculated to the yard, escorts patterned like Waltz-Vertrauen, donuts wired, trust, and they did, with the fervor of the converted, blind to the cracks spiderwebbing the doctrine. This was their cathedral, the U-boat, sacraments of sweat and steel, hymns sung in Morse and metric tons. Blind trust in the old ways wasn't arrogance, but armor, forged from patrols that bent but never broke. They'd seen the Allies flail, the early convoys scattered like chaff, escorts outrun by the pack's speed. Depth charges? A drumroll they could predict, dodge with a tilt of the planes. Even the new squid mortars, American upstarts, fizzled in trials, their patterns too wide, too slow. The Hedgehog? A footnote in the funny papers, mocked in the U-boot Zeitung cartoons circulating from boat to boat, a pricked balloon animal, deflating under its own absurdity. Warum nicht eine Kanone aus Gummi? Why not a rubber gun? Laughter was their oxygen, rationed but vital, breathed deep in the off-watches when the sea grew too loud. Yet in the quiet interstices, doubt's tendrils stirred, not as fear, but as the sea's subtle shift. Krankenhagen, charting the next leg to the Azores Gap, pauses over a hydrotrace, an anomaly, a ping that doesn't fade as it should. Feller, he mutters, error? Zoomer at the cans confirms, clean sea, no contacts. But the echo lingers in memory, a half-heard note in the symphony. The crew senses it too, in the way prayers grow longer, cigarettes shared with furtive glances. Faith holds, ironclad. They've mapped every moan of the hull, every quirk of the props, the whir of a Liberty ship, the thrum of a Flower-class corvette. The ocean's lexicon was theirs, translated through bone conduction phones, interpreted in the quiver of a needle. Night falls in the deep run, the boat submerged on batteries, creeping south toward the trade winds. The crew beds down in shifts, bodies slotted like cartridges, hammocks swaying to the boat's lullaby, snores punctuating the hum. Krankenhagen takes the captain's bunk, a canvas shelf amid the charts, his mind adrift on the tide of tomorrow's hunt. The tactics endure, he thinks, as the sea itself. Dreams come freighted, torpedoes streaking silver, explosions blooming silent in the blue. Then, unbidden, a spread of shadows arcsing from a destroyer's bow, not rolling but falling straight like judgment from above. He stirs, sweat slick, the Ritterkreuz cold against his skin. In the control room, Zoomer spells the watch, headphones clamped like a crown of thorns. The hydrophones drink the sea's chorus, shrimp snaps like distant gunfire, whale song a mournful dirge, the faint tick-tick of hulls cracking under pressure. All familiar, all scripted, until a stutter, a sound not in the score, not a screw, not a charge's bubble trail. A cluster of plunks, soft as pebbles on tin, then nothing. Zoomer blinks, adjusts the gain. Gone. Einbildung, he dismisses, imagination. But the prickle remains, a chill in the blood. The boat presses on, faith its compass, pride its prow. They are the deep's disciples, versed in its every utterance. The old tactics, unassailable, eternal. The Hedgehog? A jest, fading with the dawn. They thought they knew every sound the ocean could make. Until it made one, they didn't. In the shadowed workshops of wartime Britain, where the Thames whispered secrets to the fog-shrouded docks, innovation was less a spark than a stubborn ember, fanned by necessity, dimmed by doubt. It was 1941, and the Battle of the Atlantic had turned the Admiralty's maps into graveyards. Convoy after convoy mauled, the Wolfpacks, torpedoes carving crimson scars across the shipping lanes. Depth charges, those blunt instruments of reprisal, had ruled the counter-hunt for years. Barrels hurled astern in thunderous cascades, their blasts rolling outward like the sea's own wrath. But the U-boats, sly as eels, had learned the evasion. Slipped beneath the escort's bow into the acoustic shadow where no echo pursued, and the charges would bloom harmlessly behind, pushing the submarine deeper into sanctuary rather than doom. The blind spot was the ocean's cruel jest, a void beneath the hunter's gaze, where prey could hold its breath and wait for the storm to pass. It was this failure, this echoing silence of the missed kill that birthed the Hedgehog. Not from glory's forge, but from the quiet despair of what didn't work. Commander Charles Goodeve, a wiry Royal Navy officer with a sailor's squint and a scientist's scruple, paced the linoleum-floored labs of HMS Vernon in Portsmouth. The Navy's anti-submarine proving ground, a warren of test tanks and blackboards scarred by chalked equations. At 45, Goodeve was no desk-bound admiral, but a bridge between salt spray and slide rule. A submariner turned strategist, haunted by the ghosts of U-boat patrols he'd barely outrun. His office, a cramped nook overlooking the Solent's chop, overflowed with prototypes. Acoustic buoys tangled like fishing lines, experimental hydrophones coiled in brass. But it was the Wheezers and Dodgers who truly animated the space, an eccentric cadre of civilian boffins, plucked from Oxford's dreaming spires and Cambridge's cloistered halls, their tweed jackets at odds with the oil-streaked overalls. They were the Admiralty's secret weapon, this loose fraternity of physicists, engineers, and odd-job polymaths, nicknamed for their wheezing debates and artful dodges of bureaucratic red tape. Led by Goodeve, they toiled in secrecy, their mandate simple yet Sisyphean: break the U-boat's spell. One fog-bound afternoon in October 41, as RAF bombers droned overhead toward the Ruhr, Goodeve convened his inner circle in the tank room, a cavernous hall where scale models of Type 7 U-boats bobbed in chlorinated brine, their wooden hulls pocked by simulated blasts. The air hummed with the low thrum of pumps, the sharp scent of ozone from sparking electrodes. Around a scarred oak table hunched the Wheezers. Dr. Albert Watson, a bespectacled hydrodynamist from Edinburgh, his fingers perpetually ink-black from drafting parabolic trajectories. Edward Denniston, a lanky mathematician with a penchant for pipe smoke that curled like question marks. And young Patricia Falconer, the lone woman in the fray. A ballistics prodigy from Woolwich Arsenal, her hair pinned back under a scarf stained with blueprint ink. They were misfits in uniform, their conversations a babble of jargon. Blast radius, spallation, cavitation voids. Goodeve, sleeves rolled to his elbows, unrolled a sheaf of captured Kriegsmarine logs, smudged with seawater, detailing U-boat dives into the bow's blind spot. Goodeve, tapping the yellowed paper with a stubby pencil, his voice clipped, edged with the frustration of a man who'd seen too many empty sea searches. Gentlemen, and Miss Falconer, here's the devil in the detail. Corvette and Captain Preen's own words from Scapa Flow. Under the destroyer's nose, the charges pass astern like thunder in the hills. We've thrown 100 patterns at mock dives and the math holds. The roll attenuates forward, leaves a cone of nothing. Our depth charges save the bastard's skin. We need fire ahead, projectiles that straddle the bow, detonate on contact or proximity. No roll, no warning. Just precision. Watson leaned forward, adjusting his spectacles with a knuckle, his Scottish burr rolling like Solent pebbles. He sketched a crude array on a napkin, a ring of mortars, spigots splayed like a flower stigma, each lobbing a spherical charge in a ballistic ellipse. The projectiles, small, 30-pound bombs, finned for stability, packed with TNT but no hydrostatic fuse, contact only, to pierce the pressure hull without the wasteful bubble of underwater blasts. Watson, tracing the arcs with a greasy finger, enthusiasm warring with skepticism in his eyes. Aye, Commander, a spigot mortar, multiple tubes, 24 say in a forward cradle. Fired electrically, simultaneous spread, an elliptical pattern, 200 yards ahead at 250 meters range. Each wee bomb sinks at terminal velocity, fuses on hull strike. No big bang to scare 'em off, just a hail of hell if one connects. But the engineering, the recoil on a rolling deck, the powder charges in wet weather. It's a hedgehog, this, spines forward waiting to prick. Laughter stirred, thin and academic, cutting the tank room's damp chill. Denniston puffed his pipe, exhaling a cloud that wreathed the model U-boat like a funeral pyre. Falconer, silent till now, interjected with the cool precision of one who'd computed shell trajectories for the 8-inch guns at Dover, her voice a counterpoint, steady as a theodolite. Falconer, leaning over the sketch, pencil adding vectors in swift, elegant strokes, her tone pragmatic, laced with the quiet fire of overlooked intellect. Call it what you will, but the geometry sings. The pattern covers the blind spot, overlaps the escape dive. Depth charges waste 90% of their fury on water. These deliver it neat to the pressure plate. Trials will tell. Scale it in the tank, then lock long. But mark me, the Navy will scoff. Gadgets for eggheads, they'll say. We've prototypes for radar, for huff-duff. Yet they cling to the hammer because it's loud. Goodeve nodded, the weight of command settling like ballast in his shoulders. He was no stranger to scorn. His own submariner mates in the wardrooms of Scapa had dubbed him Professor, with a wink that masked unease. The Wheezers and Dodgers were his gamble, a wartime whisper network, funded black by Churchill's black budget, their failures as vital as victories. Past experiments littered the lab. The airborne Hedgehog spools that tangled on takeoff, the acoustic beehive, lures that drew U-boats like sirens but fizzled in thermoclines. Innovation here was iterative agony, test, fail, refine, each dud a lesson etched in smoke and shattered glass. The first bench trials came in the chill of November, in a flooded basin at Vernon, where the water lapped slate gray against concrete lips. A mock destroyer bow, plywood and pig iron, jutted from the edge, a submerged U-boat target chained 10 meters down. A steel drum, painted with conning tower silhouettes. The Hedgehog cradle, a bulky contraption of welded I-beams and bakelite housings, squatted on a jury-rigged platform, its 24 spigots yawning like organ pipes. Watson manned the firing circuit, fingers dancing over switches. Falconer clocked the trajectories with a stopgap chronograph. Denniston logged the splashes, his notebook sodden at the edges. Watson, wiping spray from his brow, voice rising over the wind's keen, excitement tempered by the engineer's eternal caution. Charge the coils, 3 kilovolts. Propellant cups seated, fire on my mark, dry. 2, 1. The launch was a muted thump. No roar, no recoil that bucked the platform, just a chorus of whooshes as the bombs arced out in their ellipse, black spheres tumbling end over end against the overcast sky. They struck the water in a stippled ripple, sinking with deceptive grace, plumes faint as ink and milk. Below, through the tank's viewing ports, the pattern bloomed, shadows converging on the drum. One connected, a sharp crack, muffled by fathoms, the hull buckling inward with a groan that vibrated the glass. Success? Partial. Sentient 7 hits in the spread, but 7 veered wild, fuses inert in the murk. Denniston, squinting at his figures, pipe clenched between teeth, his tone wry, the mathematician's delight in imperfection. Elliptical, yes, but dispersion's a devil. Windage sheared the tails, 2 sank shy, 5 overshot into the thermocline. Proximity fuses next, magnetic perhaps to sniff the steel. It's no silver bullet, Charles. More a porcupine's quill, prickly, unpredictable. Goodeve watched the debris bob to the surface, splintered wood, a finned casing bobbing like a drowned buoy. Silence followed, heavier than the blast, the kind that settles after a punchline falls flat. The Wheezers gathered their notes, the basin's pump sucking detritus with a slurping sigh. Falconer lingered, tracing a finger along the cradle's weld, a gesture almost affectionate, as if coaxing promise from the prosaic. Falconer, softly, to Goodeve as the others pack away, her eyes on the settling ripple's reflection turning inward like a tide. It whispers when it works, she murmured. No thunder to herald it. That's the terror, isn't it? The U-boat hears nothing until the hull sings back. By spring 42, the Hedgehog had clawed its way to sea trials in the Firth of Clyde, those narrow Scottish waters, lashed by gales that turned the loch to froth. HMS White Bear, a requisitioned trawler with a spine of reinforced decking, served as testbed, her forecastle retrofitted with the mortar, a 5-ton behemoth that made her list like a tipsy uncle. Goodeve stood bridge watch, binoculars trained on the submerged target, a scuttled hulk from Jutland's Ghosts, towed to 300 meters. The crew, hardy Scots fishermen pressed into naval blues, eyed the gadget with the suspicion reserved for foreign tinkers. Yon contraption'll sink us afore it sinks them. The first live run, seas at force 6, spray sheeting the pilot house like driven nails. The order crackled over the voice pipe, Hedgehog, load and stand by. Below, gunners wrestled the bombs into breaches, 30-pounders slick with oil, their contact fuses armed with a click that echoed like a cocked hammer. Firing, another subdued thump, the spread leaping forward in defiance of the pitch and yaw. But the sea had the last laugh. 8 projectiles broached, skimming surface foam before dousing harmlessly, 4 fused premature in the chop, blooming white geysers that drenched the forward gunwale. The rest, scattered wide, thudding into the loch's mud without a kiss on the target. The hulk floated on, unscathed, mocking from the depths. "T'yaller, Captain." Shaking his head as the boat wallows back to station, voice thick with Hebridean burr and bemused scorn, rain beating his sou'wester. "Begging your pardon, Commander, but that's nae more than spittin' peas at a gale. Depth charges may roll wide, but they roll. This takes a dozen men to load, fowls in the wet, and for what? A wee plop and a prayer. Admiralty'll scrap it faster than a gutted herring. Goodeve gripped the rail, knuckles whitening against the gunmetal chill, the lock's wind whipping his words to tatters. Harris spoke for the fleet. The Royal Navy, battle-hardened from Narvik to the Med, trusted the thunder, the visceral boom that shook the deck and chased the foe. Gadgets like this? Toys for the boffins, unproven in the scream of real hunts. Reports piled up in Whitehall, unreliable in Seaway, excessive deck space, crew unfamiliarity leads to misfires. Even Mountbatten, the wily chief of combined ops, wired skepticism. Forward fire promising in theory, practice proves otherwise. The Wheezers iterated in the doldrums, redesigned spigots for quicker reloads, weatherproofed electrics, even a supercharged variant with lyddite fillers for deeper punch. But belief lagged the blueprint. Trials in Loch Long yielded duds that sank silent, patterns that frayed like old rope. Summer 42 brought the nadir. A full-dress exercise off Greenock, with a Wolfpack of mock U-boats, subtenders playing the part, slipping the screen while Hedgehog-equipped corvettes flung their spreads. Contact after contact, the mortars thump lost in the gale's howl, bombs vanishing into whitecaps without trace. One corvette, HMS Loch Onyx, reported a direct hit, celebrated with a tot of rum, only for post-dive surveys to reveal a glancing scrape, the fuse inert from saltwater corrosion. Silence again? The target's crew surfacing with grins, toasting the porcupine's prick that hadn't penetrated. Goodeve, ashore that night, in a draughty Greenock pub, nursed a pint amid the pipe smoke and fishermen's yarns, his mind turning over the failure like a flawed gem. Goodeve, to Watson, across the scarred bar top, voice low amid the clamor of the bonny banks on a wheezing accordion, his eyes shadowed, the inventor's fire banked to embers. We built it to end the silence of the blind spot. Now it fails in the same hush, no bang, no feedback, just absence. The captains want roar, reassurance in the recoil. But that's the point, isn't it? Death without announcement. Watson clinked glasses, his laugh a wheeze, half exhaustion, half defiance. The Dodgers' creed, he called it, dodge the naysayers, wheeze through the wind. Back at Vernon, Falconer pored over wreckage photos by lamplight, her notations a litany of tweaks. Angled fins for stability, sealed igniters, a pattern expander to 300 yards. Deniston crunched the probabilities. 1 in 4 hits lethal, but 4 times the coverage of a single charge. Yet the Navy demurred. Hedgehogs fitted to a handful of sloops, relegated to experimental status, their crews drilling with half-belief. Donitz's boats, meanwhile, feasted on SC-107 in the fogs of October. 7 ships lost, the escort's patterns chasing phantoms astern. In the labs, as winter gnawed the Solent's edges, the Wheezers persisted. A brotherhood bound by the heresy of quiet efficacy. Goodeve stared at the latest prototype, its spigots gleaming under fluorescent glare, the bombs nested like eggs in a lethal clutch. It doesn't need to shout, he thought, to be heard in the deep. The failures had honed it, leaner, meaner, a whisper forged in the forge of doubt. No one believed. Not the admirals in their oak-paneled halls, not the captains chafing at the oars of tradition. The Hedgehog was shelved, a curiosity gathering dust in the yards of Chatham and Devonport. Born of the sea's sly voids, tested in basins that echoed with unfulfilled promise, the Hedgehog was invention's orphan, mocked by the hands it sought to arm, dismissed as the dream of men too clever for their own good. Its early salvos spoke not of victory, but of vanity. Spreads that scattered like leaves in the wind, silences that mocked the makers. The Wheezers dreamed in equations, the Navy in thunderclaps. And so it languished, a contraption of cranks and charges, waiting for the ocean to prove what pride could not. The weapon that failed in silence was about to kill in silence. By May 1944, the Atlantic's balance had tilted, subtle as the shift of a compass needle in magnetic storm. Convoys armored with hunter-killer groups, wolfpacks fractured by Bletchley's unseen scalpel. Yet the U-boats clung to their creed. Donitz's boats probing the western approaches with desperate cunning, their hulls scarred but unbowed. Rumors of the Hedgehog, that forward-firing folly, had curdled into casual dismissal, a wardroom jest traded over dwindling rations. But on the 29th, off the Azores' ragged fringe, the whisper became a wail. Escort Division 4, a trio of American D, USS Elmore, Frost, and later Atherton's Shadow, stalked convoy HX-238's flank, their screws churning a requiem for the old ways. U-549, under Kapitänleutnant Detlev Krankenhagen, A rising star from the Newland pack slipped the screen as doctrine decreed. Dive to the blind spot, silent run beneath the lead escort's bow. He trusted the physics, the patterns etched in 100 patrols. What rose to meet him was no thunder, but a silence sharper than any blade. Kapitänleutnant Detlev Krankenhagen, 28, with a duelist's poise and eyes like polished agate, conned U-5 and 49 from her attack center. A vault of dials and desperation, 220 feet down where the sea's pressure sang a constant hymn of restraint. His boat, fresh from Lorient's pens after a refit that patched torpedo scars from a scrap off Sierra Leone, prowled with the pack's remnants. U-550 and U-358 shadowing distant Enigma's ghosts linking their fates. Janglebach's crew, 46 souls honed to a razor's edge, moved in the boat's perpetual half-light, red bulbs bleeding crimson over charts smeared with pencil ghosts of convoy tracks. The air cloyed with the sour tang of batteries discharging, sweat beating on brows like mercury warnings. At the hydrophones, Matrosenobergerfreiter Hans Ritter, a farm boy from the Rhineland whose ears had saved them off Freetown, traced the escort's symphony. The thrum-thrum of twin screws on the Elmore, a Buckley-class destroyer escort, her sister Frost, a harmonic echo 500 yards starboard. Janglebach leaning into the Ouzo sight's rubber eye cup, voice a silken thread amid the boat's murmur, calculating, calm, the commander's poise a bulwark against the deep's murmur. Bearing 310, range 800 meters. Elmore leads the van, zig left in 20 seconds per the pattern. T-for 50, silent running. Ritter, sing out if the Frost tightens her arc. Ritter, head cocked under the cans, fingers drumming a phantom rhythm on the gain knob, his voice pitched low, laced with the easy confidence of youth unscarred. Clean ahead, Herr Kalu. She's blind as a cod, Aztec pinging wide, chasing shadows. Convoy's the prize. 10 merchants, 3 oiler silhouettes. We'll thread the bow, loose the eels, and be ghosts by moonrise. The boat responded like a lover to a whisper. Planes bit water, trim tanks flooded with a subdued gurgle. U-549 arrowing down to 90 meters, precisely the cradle where depth charges lost their bite. Janglebach's faith was absolute, woven from the Wolfpack's winter triumphs. The mauling of ON-226 in February, where they danced beneath HMS Vedette's futile rolls, claiming 4 hulls before scattering. The Hedgehog? A myth for greenhorns, its spreads fizzling in trials, leaving the blind spot sacrosanct. Ditactic helt, he thought, the tactics hold. Orders rippled aft, electric motors to half, every man a statue. Torpedo loaders frozen mid-wipe, cooks with spoons poised like divining rods. The world narrowed to sound, the sea's biogenic crackle, the faint ping of the Elmore's sonar bending off a thermocline layer 20 meters above. Aboard USS Elmore, Lieutenant Commander William S. Friedell, 35, Annapolis 34 graduate, with a gambler's squint and a deck salted from Guadalcanal runs, gripped the bridge rail as the convoy plowed east. HX-238, a steel leviathan of 52 ships, bound from Halifax to the Clyde with frozen beef and B-24 crates. The DE's 306-foot Greyhounds with 16 knots of spite formed the van's screen. Elmore Point, Frost to starboard, their radars, SG surface search and QHB echo sounders painting the sea in green ghosts. Friedell's crew, a mix of farm boys and Brooklyn brawlers, manned stations with the rote of revivalists. Sonar shack humming with Type 144 pings, the forward deck cluttered with the Hedgehog's cradle, a 5-ton pepper pot of 24 spigots, its black bombs nested like hornets in a riven hive. Fitted in March at Boston Navy Yard, the mortar was still an enigma to the hands. Drilled in Norfolk's mock hunts, but unblooded in the real drink. Whispers below decks called it Porcupine's Folly, its silent launch a far cry from the K-gun's satisfying kablam. Friedell, into the voice tube, voice steady over the wind's wire whine, eyes on the RDF plot where a DF fix from Frost spiked a U-boat shadow at 10 miles. Sonar, tighten the beam, bearing 305, designate Bandit 1. Gunners, Hedgehog hot, load alpha pattern fuses armed. Mr. Hayes, if she dives for the bow, we don't roll astern. We prick her. In the forward gun tub, gunner's mate first-class Tommy Hayes, a wiry Irishman from Boston's North End with knuckles scarred from bare-knuckle bouts, supervised the load. 30-pound spheres slotted into breeches with a metallic clunk, their contact fuses glinting dully. Simple strikers, no hydro bells to fuss in the wet. The crew grumbled under breath. the mortar's bulk hogging deck space better suited to depth racks, but Friedell's faith, inherited from Admiral King's offensive ASW edict, had them primed. No more chasing bubbles. The Hedgehog bridged the void, its ellipse a 200-yard kill zone ahead. Frost, under Letter Commander Thomas H. Frost himself, no relation but fate's wry nod, mirrored the drill a cable off. Her own Hedgehog cradled forward, radars synced in lethal duet. The trap snapped shut at 1430 Zulu. U-549's snort trail, a faint diesel burp on the Elmore's SN hydrophone, betrayed her flank. Gengelbach, periscope fleeting up for a convoy glimpse, cursed the leak but held course. Under the bow, the cradle. Elmore's Aztec locked, a solid echo at 400 yards, diving fast. Friedell barked the turn. Hard starboard, 15 knots, the DE heeling into the boil as Frost wheeled to parallel. No hedge, too close for patterns. This was knife fight. Hayes, straining against the lurch, slamming home the last bomb, his shout raw over the gale, mates heaving on recoil braces. Spigots charged, sir. 24, pattern alpha, 250 range. God help the crowd if she kisses us. Friedell nodded once, the order a blade drawn, fire Hedgehog. The launch was anticlimax. No thunder, just a staccato thump-thump-thump. 24 spheres erupting in ballistic grace, arsing forward in their fatal rosette against the spray-lashed sky. They punched water with muffled plops, sinking swift, 30 feet a second, no bubble veil to warn. Below, in U-549's hush, Ritter's cans drank the sea. The Elmore's screws Dopplering overhead, close, too close, then anomaly. Not the expected roll astern, but a cascade of impacts, soft as hail on the conning tower. Tick-tick-tick, steel kissing steel in the forward room. Ritter, bolting upright, headphones askew, voice cracking from boy to man in an instant, panic threading the calm. Her Kalu, contacts, not charges, bombs forward. Multiple hull strikes, bow compartment. Gengelbach spun, the boat's world fracturing, alarms wailed in red frenzy, the chief barking damage reports. Wasser eindringt. Forward tubes flooding, pressure holding at 2 atmospheres. The Hedgehog's kiss was intimate, surgical. 3 direct hull breaches, spheres punching through the outer shell like hot nails through tin, their TNT blooms inward. No external roar to shove the boat clear, just implosive fury crumpling bulkheads. Torpedo room forward. A maelstrom of steam and screams, the sea claiming lockers in a silver rush. Gengelbach's mind raced the doctrine's rails. Blow tanks, emergency blow. But the bow was leaden, planes sluggish, the boat wallowing like a gut-shot beast. Gengel clutching the voice pipe, voice iron over the klaxon's banshee, commands fire kindling in the chaos, willing belief into being. Ruder heart back, auftauchen, chief, seal forward, counterflood aft. We fight through, die tactic, but the sea decreed otherwise. Frost, circling tight, locked her own echo. U-549 broaching erratic, 200 yards off. Wilter Commander Frost, on his bridge with binoculars fogged by spray, traced the oil slick blooming like ink and cream. Hedgehog away, another muted volley, sphere stitching the wounded boat's flank. 2 connected amidships, the conning tower buckling with a muffled crump, bridge crew vanishing in a boil of air and agony. Gengelbach, hurled against the periscope standard, tasted copper, shrapnel kiss, ribs cracking like dry twigs. The boat staggered surface, diesels coughing to life, but the ocean poured judgment. Elmore's 3-inch barked fury, shells straddling the deck in white geometrics. In the control room, lights flickered to red emergency, water knee-deep and rising, cold as betrayal. Ritter, clutching a stanchion, met Gengelbach's gaze, eyes wide with the revelation, no drill prepared. Death not in thunder's roll, but in silence's stab. As Water Eagle, Ritter gasped, it was the Hedgehog. Orders dissolved to prayer. Abandoned ship, the hatch blown in a geyser of compressed air. Gengelbach, bloodied but unbowed, urged his men topside, 44 souls scrambling into the Atlantic's maw, the DEs circling like sharks denied the frenzy. But U-549, gutted forward, listed stern up, her screws thrashing futile froth. In 4 minutes, the implosion's cruel chronometer, she slid under, a final bubble sigh marking the grave. Aboard Elmore, as the slick spread iridescent, Friedell lowered his glasses, the wind carrying faint cries, German pleas swallowed by waves. Hayes, spent at the spigots, wiped black powder from his palms, the mortar cooling silent, its quills spent. Friedell, to the bridge watch, voice subdued, the victor's hush heavy with the cost, gazing at the empty patch of sea where echoes faded. One spread, gentlemen, no chase, no waste. Log it, U-boat destroyed, position 4015N, 3520 watt. And tell the boffins in London, their toy just grew teeth. Word crackled west. BDU in Berlin, Donitz's map room, a tomb of pins and phantoms, received the fragment, U-549 overdue. Oil and debris confirmed by a patrolling Libra. No mayday, no fight back. Just verschwunden, vanished. Packs like Goeben and Preußen pressed on, but the jest soured. Reports from survivors of U-358, depth-charged but scarred, whispered of forward explosions without pattern. Lorient's pen, once echoing with laughter, fell quiet, crews eyeing charts with new calculus, the blind spot no sanctuary. Jengelbach's Ritter, plucked from a Carly float by Frost's whaleboat, spilled in interrogation, Der Eagle, fuhrt voraus, trifft ohne Warnung. The Hedgehog fires ahead, strikes without warning. Donitz, in his Spartan office overlooking the Baltic slate, crumpled the transcript. Unmöglich, he muttered, but the math mocked him. May's toll. 15 boats to the weeds, patterns shifting from evasion to erasure. The encounters multiplied, chipping certainty like rust on iron. U-4 and 28 off the Hebrides, hedgehogged by HMS Vernon in June, her crew bobbing testimony to the new terror. No slow strangling by charges, just the plink of doom, hulls folding in seconds. German captains, veterans like Krankenhagen of U-160, now patrolling the mid-Atlantic gap, adjusted dives shallower, snorkels raised defiant, but the escorts adapted. Hunter-killers with squid auxiliaries, but Hedgehog the scalpel. Pride cracked. In wardrooms over Ersatz tea, the talk turned inward. Haben wir die See verloren? Have we lost the sea? The laughter, once oxygen-choked now, replaced by the dread of silence unbroken. By autumn's gales, the weapon's whisper had rewritten the deep. 20 confirmed kills, Doctrine's corpse washing ashore in empty pens. Survivors returned hollow, eyes haunted by what they hadn't heard, the ocean's lexicon expanded by absence. Jengelbach's ghost lingered in logs, a captain who trusted the cradle, drowned in its collapse. In that May maelstrom, rumor forged to reality, the Hedgehog turned the Atlantic's grammar. No more dances in the void, just judgment's quiet hail. German submariners, masters of the murmur, faced annihilation swifter than thought, belief's blind spot their undoing. The packs thinned, the convoys swelled, the war's tide inexorable. What they mocked as toy became terror incarnate, efficiency's elegant blade. It didn't roar when it struck, it simply erased what it touched. By the autumn of 1944, the Atlantic had swallowed its requiem whole, not in the cataclysm of grand fleets clashing, but in the piecemeal unraveling of a doctrine once thought eternal. The Hedgehog, that unheralded contrivance of British basements and American decks, had etched its legacy not in parades or patents, but in the stark arithmetic of the absent. U-boats that departed Lorient's pens with fanfare and returned as stains on the tide. Over 200 confirmed kills by war's end, though the true tally, lost to the weeds, whispers higher. Its spigots had fired the death knell for Donitz's Wolfpacks, turning hunters into the hunted with a efficiency as cold as the Gulf Stream's undercurrent. No longer did escorts chase ghosts astern, now they pierced the veil forward, their patterns a mathematical mercy killing. The ocean floor, from the Grand Banks to the Biscay Gap, bore testimony. Steel sarcophagi twisted inward, conning towers sheared like snapped stems, the skeletal remains of 783 U-boats cradling the bones of 28,000 men. Pride's pyre, doctrine's dirge. The Hedgehog sank not just submarines, but the certainty that skill alone could defy the deep. In the marbled halls of the Admiralty, Whitehall, September 1944, Commander Charles Goodeve stood before a wall of charts, Atlantic lanes inked with red arcs of victory, each a hedgehog's ellipse claiming its due. At 48 now, his sailor's frame thinned by chain-smoked vigils and victory's hollow bite. He traced a finger along the mid-Atlantic track where U-549 had met her end. A smudge of oil, a debris field logged by Elmore's survivors. The Wheezers and Dodgers, his band of basement alchemists, had scattered to peacetime pursuits. Watson back to Edinburgh's lecture halls, Falkiner to the ministry's ballistics desk, Denniston to code-cracking's twilight. But Goodeve lingered, a ghost in the machine, compiling the post-mortem. Reports from the yards at Devonport, where sloops like HMS Vernon returned with spigots scarred but unbowed, their logs a litany of clean kills. The weapon's evolution, tweaked fuses for magnetic proximity, expanded patterns to 300 yards had made it commonplace, fitted to over 300 escorts by VE Day. Yet triumph tasted of ash, each kill a calculus of lives, German crews no less ensnared by duty's dragnet than his own. Goodeve, to a cluster of post-war analysts in the map room, his voice measured, laced with the philosopher's pause, gesturing to a superimposed grid of blind spots erased. It wasn't vengeance that won this, gentlemen. It was precision's quiet insistence. The U-boat captains, men like Jengleback, tacticians to their marrow, dived into what they knew. The bow's shadow, the charge's blind roll. Our Hedgehog filled that void with geometry, not wrath. One sphere suffices where 10 charges fail. Silence becomes the signature. But mark the cost. They believed in their sea as we in ours. Now the deep is neutral again, obeys only the math, not the map. The analysts nodded, pencils scratching, young Oxbridge men, untouched by salt, graphing legacies in ledgers. Falconer, visiting from her desk at the Woolwich Proving Grounds, interjected from the room's edge, her scarf still blueprint-stained, voice a bridge between war's roar and peace's murmur. Falconer, stepping forward, unfolding a sheaf of trial photos, faded now, edges curled like old wounds, her tone reflective, the inventor's fire tempered to glow. And the failures? We forget them in victory's ledger. Clyde trials were spreads scattered like chaff, fuses dulled by the spray. The Navy called it folly till the wrecks proved otherwise. It sank certainty, Charles, not just hulls. Those German survivors hauled from Carly floats by our boys, their eyes weren't defiant. Haunted. Was war das, they'd ask. What was that? A soundless stab, death without the dignity of duel. Goodeve met her gaze, the shared silence a nod to the unsung. The gunners like haze on Elmore, black-powdered hands trembling post-kill, the radiomen logging confirmed sink with mechanical dispassion. The Hedgehog's legacy rippled beyond the war, squid mortars its kin, post-war ASW a symphony of sensors and spreads. But in the quiet calculus, it was elegy, a weapon that whispered, forcing reflection on the hubris of the loud. No glory is here, only the morals murmur. Progress doesn't always roar. Sometimes it calls your name in the dark. Across the channel, in Berlin's labyrinthine corridors of the OKM, Oberkommando der Marine, Admiral Karl Dönitz, Grand Admiral now, Führer's heir apparent, brooded over dispatches that bled red. May's black month bleeding into June's hemorrhage, 41 boats lost, then 52. The packs reduced to whispers on the ether. At 53, his face a map of fjords and furrows, the Ritterkreuz at his throat a weight rather than talisman, he paced his office overlooking the Tiergarten's skeletal elms, bomber-scarred sentinels mirroring his fleet's fate. Enigma's veil torn by Ultra's unseen hand, snorkels hunted by aircraft with eyes like gods, but the Hedgehog, that was the scalpel in the ribs. Reports from Lorient survivors, Ritter of U-549, repatriated via Geneva, his testimony smuggled back, painted the horror. Forward fire, no warning, strikes like lightning in the cradle. Dönitz, to his staff officers in the smoke-hazed briefing room, voice a whip crack over the clatter of telex machines, defiance cracking at the edges, the Admiral's creed fraying like signal flags in gale. Lügen, propaganda from the Tommies' pens. The boats are sound. Rudeltaktik evolves. Deeper dives, wider spreads, night surfaces under the new moon. This eagle is myth. A scatter of duds, physics unchanged. We've bled for the Führer, ton for ton, and will not yield to parlor tricks. Die Boote müssen schwimmen, deeper, bolder. Berlin demands results. The Atlantic will deliver. The officers shifted, faces gaunt as the rationed bread, Korvettenkapitän Friedrich from the pens, his uniform threadbare, eyes hollow from burying comrades. Lieutenant Zoomer, reassigned from U-160 after a near miss off the Azores, his hands still twitching at phantom hydro cans. They knew the lie. U-160 herself, Krankenhagen's ghost boat, had tasted the quill in July. A Hedgehog spread from USS Atherton, stitching her flank, forcing a limp return to Brest with half her tubes flooded. Krankenhagen, invalided out with shrapnel scars, penned letters home that never mailed. The sea has changed its tongue. We no longer speak it. Dönitz's denial was doctrine's death rattle, clinging to schwerpunkt masses even as boats sailed solo, Enigma's ciphers rerouted daily, packs reduced to pairs probing the periphery. Survivors' memoirs, ghostwritten in POU camps, bore the tone not of rage but requiem. We measured courage in silence, but silence betrayed us. In the pens at Lorient, October's rains drumming on concrete vaults like impatient fingers, the remnants gathered, crews of U-1223 and U-300, faces etched with the attrition of the absent. Weber, The Berliner galley hand from U-60, now boatswain on a sister boat, shared smokes in the damp shadows, his voice a threadbare weave of what was and what wasn't. Weber, huddled under a dripping awning, passing a Turkish to a young matros, his beard grayer, eyes distant as the horizon he once trusted. Krankenhagen said it in the wardroom after the patch. Blut and Stahl bends, but the deep, it breaks you clean. That Hedgehog, no roar to brace for, just the tick and the crush. Ritter came back from the camp, whispering of it, strikes you can't hear till the water's in your lungs. We laughed once, called it toy. Now, the sea's toys are teeth. The matros nodded, young face creased beyond years, clutching a letter from a fiancé in Kiel, unopened, perhaps forever. Rituals persisted, defiant. The evening appel, voices thinner, the U-boot lead hummed low in the galleys. But faith had fledged to fear. Dives shallower, surfacing frantic under star shells, the blind spot mapped and mined. Donitz's wires from Berlin, Vertrauen, adapt, rang hollow as the hulls they couldn't save. By V-Day, May 1945, the Grand Admiral surrendered at Reims. His fleet scuttled off Wilhelmshaven, 118 boats to the breakers, the rest graves in the gray. His trial at Nuremberg, in the dock with Goering's bluster, painted him martyr. The U-boat war was just, but in private depositions, a crack. The weapon, it ended us without mercy. Leutnant Commander Louis Eastland of USS Atherton, one of the Hedgehog's late apostles, reflected in a San Diego wardroom post-war, his DE the scourge of the Biscay, claiming U-196 in March 45 with a single spread that folded her like wet paper. At 40, with a Navy Cross pinned fresh, he sipped coffee black as the oil slicks he'd logged, speaking to a circle of brother captains, Friedell among them, Hayes now warrant, his hands steady at last. Iselin, leaning on the bulkhead, voice gravel from smokes and screams, eyes on the harbor's bobbing hulls, pieces fragile fleet, we proved it off the Azores, U-549 sister, dove bowled into the bow. Thump. Gone in the hush. No chase, no waste. The Krauts, doctrine died there. Pride in the patterns till the pattern pricked back. Goodeve's boys sent blueprints, we made 'em sing. But those wrecks down there? Not enemies. Men who trusted the tide. The Hedgehog taught us, certainty sinks faster than steel. Friedell raised his mug, the toast unspoken to the quiet ones. Hayes, polishing a relic spigot fuse on the table, traced its grooves with a thumb scarred by powder burns, his laugh a ghost of Boston docks. Hayes, grinning faint, the gunner's fire banked to embers, voice thick with the north end lilt, reflection turning wry. Toy? Hell, it was judgment. Fired it at ghosts, hit souls. Now back to trawl and cod, but the sea, she remembers. Whispers your name if you listen wrong. The war's wake lapped on. Memoirs from the survivors, Krankenhagen's Tiefseejäger, published in 48, a lament in lieu of defiance. Ritter's oral histories, taped in Bonn, mourning the lexicon lost. Donitz, imprisoned till 56, penned 10 Jahre und 20 Tage, 10 years and 20 days. A defense laced with the unsaid. The eagle, it was the turning. The Hedgehog faded to footnote, eclipsed by jets and atoms, but its echo endured in naval texts. The birth of precision ASW, the lesson that innovation whispers while tradition thunders to dust. The ocean floor, testament eternal. U-160's husk off Newfoundland, her pressure gauges frozen at crush depth, cargoes of belief spilled like spam crates into the current. In the end, the deep claimed its impartial due. German pride, British pluck, American grit, all leveled by the wave's whim. The laughter of 43, born in bunkers over Ersatz brew, echoed now only in the silence of the wrecks. A eulogy for certainty, sung in bubbles long burst. They thought they ruled the deep, but the ocean obeys only truth. If you believe forgotten weapons hold unforgettable lessons, subscribe for more untold World War II stories.